Yes,
Yeah.
working on these essential human skills while also staying open to what are the good bits of AI that I want to take. Because if we just stick our head in the sand, a bit like, the famous Kodak story where you go, oh no, we'll be right. This digital photography thing, it's never going to take over the world, and went from one of the biggest companies to almost non-existent.
The reason you're not confident might actually be because you don't have good communication skills. If you want to improve your confidence, getting better at communication is one of the best places to start. In this episode, I sit down with Leah Mether, a communication expert and leadership trainer. Whether it's handling tough conversations, setting boundaries, or learning to speak up without overthinking everything, we break down what actually makes someone a great communicator. We talk about why so many of us struggle to be direct, the biggest mistakes people make when trying to be assertive, and how you can find balance between being too passive or too aggressive. Leah also talks about some simple and practical strategies that you can immediately use to stop second-guessing yourself, to say what you actually mean, and to navigate conversations without all the stress. If you've ever avoided a difficult chat, worried about how you come across, or you just want to feel more in control when you speak, then make sure to listen to this episode. Welcome to Move Your Mind, where we uncover why you are holding yourself back from getting the life you want and what to do about it. With the help from high-achieving guests and experts in behavioural science, personal development, and the health and wellness space. Join us if you're ready to move out of your own way toward your ideal self. I'm your host, Nick Brax, and I've been working in the health and wellness space for the last 15 years, helping people find direction and gain the courage to take control of their life. My mission is simple: to help you learn everything that I wish I knew so you can become your ideal self. Lacking guidance, I spent the majority of my youth feeling lost and disempowered, which led to depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and substance abuse. Looking back, I didn't have the vocabulary to communicate what I was experiencing. And as a man, I didn't resonate with the emotional language used in traditional therapy. I didn't need to talk about my feelings. I needed tangible solutions to guide me toward building a life I was proud of. If you can relate, then this podcast is for you. In this episode, we discuss how to communicate with confidence, set boundaries, and take control. If you're ready to take action and build a stronger mindset, then keep listening. Leah, thank you so much for making the time to come on my podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Appreciate it. I always ask at the very beginning, can you just give a background on yourself and the work you do, just so our listeners can learn a little bit more about you before we jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you can obviously tell from my accent, I am Australian based in regional Victoria. And essentially, I'm a communication trainer. And what I'm obsessed with is making the people part of leadership and work life easier. And as I am forever saying with the people I work with, that is the hardest part. It is not the technical parts of our job. It is the peopling, whether it's in personal life, professional life, that is the trickiest, because we're all different. No one thinks exactly like us. And how I came to this, I've run my own business for about 14 years now. I started my business when I had my family. Started as a communication consultant. I have a background as a journalist and in corporate communications. So that was sort of my start. And through those roles, I learned how to, have conversations with people from all different walks of life, from politicians to someone who had just gone through a really hard time, with a bushfire or something like that. And how do I connect, build trust quickly, create a safe space for people to open up? And then I suppose it was about 2015, as I was working as a consultant, more doing the strategy work of communication, that more and more people kept coming to me to say, how do we actually have these conversations, Leah? How do I have a difficult conversation under pressure? How do I speak up and be assertive? How do I say no? Or our more aggressive communicators were saying, geez, I've always been like a bull at a gate, command and control style, and that's not getting me the results I want. How can I tone it down a bit? So it was probably at about that time that I went, actually, there's a real gap in people teaching these skills in a way that's relatable and accessible. There's a lot of communication trainers out there, that probably come from a bit more of an academic sense. I call myself a pracademic. I try to be as relatable and real as possible. So that's really where I am today. I work Australia-wide, some occasional international gigs as well, predominantly as a trainer, but also as a speaker. And that's where I am, mum of 3 gorgeous boys living in a gorgeous part of the world.
Love it. Well, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I love what you're talking about there with, the practical side of it and the more, really humanizing it rather than just the academic side, because it's so hard to really, make change when we're only getting one part of the puzzle, because, we're all human. We all have emotions we deal with every single day, and other people have emotions, and you've got to have 2 people with different emotions trying to understand each other and weave through that. And if we don't have that understanding and we just did try and approach it from a textbook, you're only going to get so far.
And absolutely, because there is no one right or wrong way when it comes to peopling, because we are all so different. I often joke that if people come along to my training just wanting the silver bullet, or just tell me what to say in every situation that's going to get me results, I'm really sorry, there's not a silver bullet, because what might work if I'm communicating with you may be the total opposite of what someone else needs. If I'm dealing with someone who is quite aggressive, my approach to them has to be very different to someone who is quieter and more passive and is unlikely to speak up. So that's why we have to make it real, for real life.
Yeah, exactly. Because it doesn't really make sense to me that you could become effective with it if it was just learning, okay, in this situation, I say this, when this happens, I say this, because there's nothing underneath then. You're sort of just saying something for the sake of saying it, and it doesn't really have any impact. So I guess, is it about trying to help people understand more how to be almost improvising and have the right tools to pull on if they're reading what's happening in that moment? Or I don't know if that's the right way of explaining it. But
what I would actually say is that most people think that improving their communication is about the communication tips and tricks. Just give me the tips and tricks, Leah, help me have the conversation. And what I actually suggest is most people know the basics of how to communicate. That's not the problem. The problem is they're not doing the foundational work on themselves that sets them up for success in their communication. Things like making a choice about who you are and who you want to be, and taking personal responsibility for your own communication and behavior, regardless of what anyone else does to you. Now, that doesn't excuse poor behavior in others, but we have to get really clear as a starting point about, who do I want to be? Who do you want to be, Nick? What do you want to be known for? Because how you communicate impacts and influences that. So it starts with that. And then really, once you've made that choice about who you are and who you want to be, well, can you do it under pressure? Can you regulate your emotions under pressure? Can you have an open mindset where you get curious and you choose your response? Or do you go straight to victim mode? Do you go straight to deny, blame, and justify? Because if that's what you do mindset-wise, it does not matter what tips and tricks you won't use them. And knowing and doing are 2 very different things when it comes to communication. You can listen to a podcast, you can sit in a training session and smile and nod and go, that all sounds great, Leah. But, and I would say this to listeners too, it's what you do with it that matters. How do you regulate your emotions? We've then got to do a bit of thinking before we have those conversations. Like I said, one size does not fit all. So there's so much that goes under how we communicate that if we actually work on those foundations, if you work on your mindset, if you work on your emotional intelligence, if you work on considering what outcome do I want from this conversation, and then how do I tailor my approach to give me the best chance of achieving it, That's really the foundational stuff that determines your success. Then you can get into the nitty gritty of, what I might do and what I might not do. And, to give you an example, I just am really aware that when you talk about this stuff, particularly things like make a choice about who you are and who you want to be, it can sound a bit airy-fairy, right? Like, oh, come on, Leah, if I've got to have a hard conversation, you can't be serious. That, why does that matter? And I just want to share with you a story of when I've used this to navigate a really tough time in my life and how important this is. So in 2021, my marriage ended, and I was married for 12 and a half years. I've got 3 gorgeous young boys who are now early teens. And as we know, based on the research, based on the reality for anyone who's been through a separation or divorce, that is one of the most stressful things a person can go through. The chance of conflict is very high, right? You've got 2 people, tensions up there, emotions up there. And that question of what do you want to be known for? What is it like to be around me? That's exactly where I went when my marriage ended. It's what I teach other people, and I thought I better practice what I preach. So I asked myself, navigating marriage, separation and divorce, what do I want to be known for, regardless of what I get back from my ex-husband? And I said, I want to be known for navigating this with love, kindness and compassion. Now, they sound bloody lovely. However, love, kindness and compassion when you're dealing with such a high tension and emotion time is actually really hard to do. But because I got so crystal clear on that, it became like my North Star and my touchstone, where I went, you know what? We are family forever. I want to set a good example for my kids. My ex-husband's going to be part of my life forever through the kids. Regardless of what I get back, this is important to me. This is the person I want to be. And I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror and go, I'm comfortable with how I handled that. So because I got so clear on it, I kept coming back to that. Now, I'm not perfect. I am human too. I had my moments where I wanted to have a little rant, but if I needed to do that, I would do it appropriately with one of my sisters or my mum, so that I could then show up as the person I wanted to be with my ex-husband and my kids. I didn't post it on Facebook. I didn't rant about it to everyone. I knew what was appropriate and what wasn't. And I share that because this is the stuff that really matters if we want to be able to communicate effectively.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. I think that's so powerful, that story and that example, because as you talk on so many levels, and I guess like the stuff you're talking about in terms of, just getting so clear on who do you, who are you, what do you want to stand for, how do you want to show up? I think that applies to just all areas of life, whatever we're doing, whatever we're approaching. And, the work I do, that's really the fundamental, because if you don't do that on yourself, you can't really make an aligned decision. And yeah, I know in the past, like I was, going down a certain path, trying to be someone that I wasn't really being true to myself that I was. I was still, had a lot of behaviors, including alcohol, that weren't in line with the message I was putting out there and who I was telling myself I was. And you feel that misalignment. And when I did really make the changes, and when, behind closed doors, when no one, there's no validation, no one's going to know what I'm doing apart from me. Yeah. Once I really made those changes, and I could look myself in the mirror and say, you know what, I'm actually doing everything properly, and I'm taking the steps, and I'm showing up as the person I truly, truly want to be. It does change everything, and it's so hard to do, but it's it's so important, like you're saying.
And I think, to be frank, I think it's one of those reasons that people do just want the tips and tricks, because it's like, just give me tips and tricks, because that sounds way harder. And as you said, it is hard, but it changes everything, because once you can do, and you're spot on, and I sadly see people in workplaces and personal lives all the time who are communicating and behaving totally out of alignment with the person they want to be, and they have not even clocked that. They're not even self-aware. But when they actually get to, I had a guy in a workshop recently. He was there for work, but he came up to me afterwards and he said, you got me thinking about how I parent my kids. He said, when you said, who do you want to be? What do you want to be known for? He said, I thought about my teenage boys and I thought, I don't want to be anything like my dad was, because he wasn't a great dad. I didn't know that he loved me. And I always said, I do not want to be like that. And my follow-up question to who do you want to be, I challenged people to say, let's acknowledge where you're at. Not to beat yourself up, not to self-loathe, just let's try to be as open and honest as possible and acknowledge, what's it like to be around me? Am I communicating and behaving in alignment with who I want to be? And this guy said to me afterwards, he said, you made me stop and realize that our intention is different to how we're perceived by other people. Most people are well-intended. And this guy said, I want to be a great dad. I want to communicate differently with my kids. However, when I stop and think about it, I'm falling into those same behaviors that were modeled to me. I'm playing bad cop and my wife's playing good cop. I know I desperately love my kids, but am I actually telling them that? Or am I just hoping that they are mind readers and can pick that up? And it was really profound. He had this big moment in, what was a short training session for work, that how he was showing up and communicating was misaligned with who he wanted to be. And when you get clear on it, makes the communication part so much easier. You know, things like saying no are really tricky. Things like holding boundaries or making decisions that are right for you, even if other people don't understand them. Those things are really hard to do. They take a huge amount of courage, but really it's so much easier to do them if we have that clarity first. It makes the communication part a whole lot easier.
Yeah, because then you've got a framework where if you're being true to yourself like that, you can filter it through, okay, does this or does this not fit in with, you know, whatever my filter is. And if it doesn't, then regardless of your emotion, you've got a system of how to then approach it. So if you're having to have a hard conversation and say no, if you're having to put up a boundary, you know that if you're being true to yourself based on, you know, doing that work you're talking about, that you are going to have that hard conversation. You can't avoid it. So it's sort of having that structure really can help so much. You're looking to make a change, to lose weight, to get toned, to gain self-confidence, all in just 24 minutes a day, then go no further. You can check out the Move Your Mind community by going to nickbrax.start.page.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, then you have the conversation the best way possible and you hope the other person comes with you, but you're also more aware that, you know, I can't control how you react to me. I can influence it by having the conversation in the best way possible. But, you know, going to Stephen Covey's Circles of Influence, which is, you know, over 30 years old now, but still stands up, that beautiful model about what can I control, what can I influence, what do I need to accept or let go of. I can't control how you respond to me when I have that conversation. Like I said, I can influence it. And I owe it to you and to me to try to influence it by raising it the best way possible, being clear and kind and compassionate in the way I have the conversation. But then the ball's kind of in your court and I've got to be prepared to let the chips fall where they may. And if you have a really bad reaction to me and I'm comfortable that I had to have this conversation, I did it in the best way possible, I can do the reflection. Is there anything I would have done differently? No, actually, I'm okay with that. The fact that you react poorly is really unfortunate, but that doesn't sit with me. That's about what's going on for you.
Yeah, exactly. And we can't control that. And if we took that on all day, every day, in every situation, we'll have a breakdown because you can't hold all of that negativity inside of you. You've got to be able to know that you're putting your best foot forward and just let those things, you know, that you can't control, just let it go.
Yeah, and I think this is where a lot of people do tie themselves in knots. A lot of people out there are people pleasers. And they think, you know, but maybe if I say this thing and I don't push back against you, and they tie themselves in absolutely in knots. And the brutal fact is You cannot please all the people all the time. If you try to do that, you will fail. There is nothing surer. Some people just won't like you. And
Yeah.
they might not like you because you smile all the time. And Nick, that's suspicious. What the hell is that about? You know, you're always smiling. That's dodgy, right? You know, people will do that. They
Yeah.
will have, for whatever reason, you won't connect with everyone, and that's okay.
Yeah.
On the flip, some people say, I don't care what others think of me. My response to that is, well, you should. But let me put a caveat on that. Some of us go people pleaser to the extreme, and we worry so much about what other people think of us. As we've just discussed, if you're really clear on who you are and who you want to be, you're communicating as effectively as possible. If someone doesn't like you, okay. But we do have to have a bit of self-awareness, because if my intention is to be an assertive communicator in the workplace, and all of my colleagues think she's not assertive, she's aggressive. And I sit here going, well, I don't care what other people think of me because I'm comfortable that I'm being assertive. The fact that you're closed-minded and won't even acknowledge or be open to considering it probably says a lot there. But you do want to be open to going, is there anything in that?
Yeah.
Is the way people are perceiving me? Because if I want to be effective and you all have written me off as aggressive and none of you want to work with me, then I actually do have a problem there. And the fact that I don't think I'm aggressive is almost irrelevant, because if it's impacting my ability to communicate, then I want to have some awareness of that. And not in every situation, but I at least want to be reflecting, could I do something differently? Could I change my approach a bit here? Maybe I'm working with people who are quieter and actually they do need a bit of a softer approach to get the best out of them. You don't have to do it, but if you want to be effective, you probably should.
Yeah, just being able to, I guess, like you're saying again, if you've got more, if you work on yourself and have more self-awareness, you're probably going to have more ability to also read other people and read what they're more likely to respond to and not respond to, if you're thinking from that, in that line of thinking.
Yeah, and if anyone's listening to this thinking, oh, but, you know, I've communicated one way my whole life, or this is just who I am, this is fixed, I really want to urge you to reconsider that, because communication is a skill. Emotional intelligence is a skill. Yes, different people are born with, you know, different strengths and weaknesses, but just like any skill, these can be learned, improved, and developed. They are not fixed. They're not just innate. You can develop your communication skills regardless of age, regardless of background, education. Some of the most educated people I know are the worst communicators. So it's not necessarily tied to how smart or educated you are. Anyone can improve these skills, but two big caveats to that: if you're willing to learn and if you're willing to do the work.
Yeah,
Right? If you're
exactly.
listening to this going, bet you can't teach me, well, Nick can't, I can't, because we're not magicians. But if you listen going, oh, actually, maybe my communication is not as effective as I'd like it to be. Maybe my mindset isn't. Maybe that's what's holding my communication back, that I'm, you know, always feeling hard done by, or I'm going to victim mode, or I'm always going to blame people. Even if that's how you have been your whole life, you can retrain your brain. But it does take effort. It is hard work. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. But if you're willing to do it, again, it changes everything, because communication underpins every relationship you have, personal or professional.
Yeah, and I think that's such good advice for anyone listening, to be able to understand that, you know, I think a lot of people have the view of it that it's something you're either naturally good at or you're not. So being able to really, you know, make it more clear that, okay, maybe it's not something that comes as naturally to you, but if you want to explore it, if you're open-minded, if you want to put the work in, you could become as good as anyone. You might have to work harder than someone who's natural at it, the same way that that person who's natural at that probably doesn't have the same gifts you have in other areas, but we can all put in the effort and put in the work to get better at it.
And I've got to say, it's never been more important at a time when AI, all the different technologies out there. The world is changing at such a fast pace. And I'm having this conversation a lot at the moment with people saying, because obviously, particularly written communication, AI is being an awesome tool there for helping democratize communication in the written form and really helping people with low literacy skills upskill. But, emotional intelligence, communication, things like that, are they important in the modern world? They're actually more important because these skills are going to be what sets us apart from the robots, from technology. So the people I'm working with, for example, whether you're a power industry worker, whether you're an accountant, if you're an accountant, there is going to be software that can do the bulk of your job if all you do is the numbers. But if you can build relationships, if you can communicate effectively with your colleagues to explain the why they should care about bringing the budget down or whatever it might be, or in your personal life, that is going to be more and more valuable because it's rare.
100%.
So if you want to future-proof your career, regardless of career, I do a lot of work in the mining industry here in Victoria and, going through industry transition away from coal-fired power. And those guys who are blue-collar as they come, I'm working with a lot of them to upskill them in communication because when they go for their next job, the fact that they know how to use a dozer or operate the machinery, that's just like baseline. That's a given. Who are organisations hiring? They're hiring the people that can call out a safety issue if they see it, who can work in a team effectively and get on well with others, who can have a challenging conversation with respect without attacking people. And that's getting more and more rare, isn't it? We're getting so polarised, we're forgetting how to do that. But these are absolutely the skills we need.
Yeah. Are you interested in joining a community of like-minded people who are on the same journey as you are? Even though you're the one that needs to do the work, you don't have to go it alone. You can find all of the information at nickbrax.start.page. Yeah, it's funny. I was literally this morning having a conversation with a friend about, what you're talking about there. And I guess, it's interesting because so many people with technology would probably be thinking the opposite. Okay, technology can do all these different things. Do I even need to be a good communicator anymore? I can whatever. But it's becoming so advanced and it's only going to get, a million times better that it's going to be the same as just having access to water. We're all going to have access to technology that can pretty much do anything. So if that evens the playing field, like you're saying there, it becomes more important than ever. And, the person I was talking to is in, the fitness industry, and we're looking at, personal training softwares and AI now already. You could download an app right now with AI, plug in what you want, and it will spit out all these programs and customize or whatever. So it's like, well, why do you need a person then? Well, because people want to connect, they want accountability, they want etc. So if you can learn to be the best at that, you can dominate different industries. But because you will stand out, you'll have something that you can't be replaced by technology.
Yeah, because it's about that relationship, right?
Yeah.
You're spot on. And fitness is a great example. You don't need to be the best trainer in terms of that, because you can learn that quickly now. The technical side, the hard skills are much quicker and easier to learn. They're easy to do with AI. But if I want a person and a relationship, and if you can give me that in that safe space, you've got no problem. You're going to still be in business. But the people who, and it doesn't mean everyone has to be an extrovert. I really want to make that clear in case there's people listening who are like, oh, but I like the quiet and I don't necessarily like, being the life of the party. That's okay. It requires all different people connect in different ways. Some people like connecting with extroverts. Other people love that deeper, slower connection with more passive or introverted people. The key, though, is regardless of your style, we need to see that this is essential. These are essential human skills. And it's not just me saying that these are important. The likes of NASA, of Google, of Deloitte Access Economics, of Combank, all of their studies are saying the same thing at the moment when they're looking at what are the skills of the future. They are usually things that, they include something around adaptability because things are changing so fast. But then it's all the stuff around human-centered communication, emotional intelligence, those key skills. They've never been more important.
Good. You're keeping me excited about my future because these are all the areas I'm trying to build my career in. So I'm happy about that.
You'll be
That's
fine.
exciting.
You do it well, and it sets you apart.
But it is so funny, like we're talking about, because all of us are fearing actually the opposite. Everything's going to become obsolete. All of our skills, all of our humanity. The other industry I'm in is film and TV, and people so worried that AI is going to just replace even needing actors and things like that. And
Yeah.
I don't think it really can, because people, even if you could make it as good as a human on screen, why would a human want to watch a computer pretending to be a human when they can watch an actual real human be a human? It doesn't make sense, really.
Yeah, I mean, like all things, it will probably impact the people who don't do things well.
Yeah.
AI will absolutely have a huge impact on. But yeah, that human connection, that role of people doing it, will always be there. But a great mate of mine put it really well recently, Donna McGeorge. She is an Australian author who's written a heap of books on productivity, but her latest one is called The ChatGPT Revolution. And what she says in that is, don't worry about AI taking your job. Worry about humans who know how to use AI taking your job.
Yeah,
and what
yeah.
she was saying was, it's not going back in a box. It's here. So, and it's only advancing. So the best thing we can do is get open-minded and curious and go, how could this enhance what I'm doing? Because there are great, benefits from using it well, but it's a tool. It doesn't replace everything. It's just a tool. And we do need, for those people or organisations resistant to it, they're the ones who are in danger, because your skill set can then become obsolete. So yes, working on these essential human skills while also staying open to what are the good bits of AI that I want to take. Because if we just stick our head in the sand, a bit like, the famous Kodak story where you go, oh no, we'll be right. This digital photography thing, it's never going to take over the world, and went from one of the biggest companies to almost non-existent.
Yeah, exactly. And there are so many amazing things with AI. It can speed up so many processes. And I mean, even if I look at the podcast, just with when I'm putting descriptions together, I can literally, like from this interview, I can get an entire transcript, chuck that into ChatGPT, say, summarize this, tell me the key points, blah, blah, blah. And then you refine it. And, a task that might have taken me an hour or half an hour can be done in 5 minutes. So It's amazing for that kind of stuff. It's so helpful.
Absolutely. But the key thing there for listeners who might have missed it was Nick said, and then I refine it. So
yes,
that's right. It's a tool. You get that summary quicker, but then you're still reading over it going, is this my voice? Are there a few changes to make? You're not just, the ones that, and this is so relevant to communication, the ones that are really falling down is they're going, oh, AI is great for communication. Let me just slap it in there, get it to write it. Then I'll, get it to write my CV or resume. I'll get it to write that thing that sounds nothing like me, and I won't make any refinements. And it's clear as day that it is AI that's written it. Then you're going to fall flat on your face. But you use it smartly, and it's a huge tool for communication. Like I said, I work with some leaders who have brilliant verbal communication skills, but their literacy isn't maybe as high as they'd like it. Maybe they didn't do well at grammar at school. And for them, AI is a game changer.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. So you've got to look at all ends of the spectrum with this stuff and find the intersection that works for you.
Yeah.
How, we've talked a little bit about, victim mindset. I see that all of the time. And like you're talking about polarization, how big of a problem do you think that is in the world at the moment? Because you sort of see, it seems like there's more and more, and with how crazy even things are politically, people can easily, just sort of, post things on social media, complain, et cetera, make all these statements, release all this anger, and it's kind of addictive to be doing that, because then you're feeling like you're putting all of that angst somewhere. But if it's not actually doing anything to help with any cause, and you're using it as an excuse to not actually take accountability for things that are going on, I guess you stay stuck. Like, do you think is that a big thing? Like, people that are in that mindset?
Absolutely huge. So a couple of things there. You are spot on. We are in a time of increasing polarization, where there's a lot of dehumanization going on. It's almost a time where connection is a rebellious act. Connection and community is a rebellious act. I've been speaking a lot in the media here in Australia, in a lot of my workshops. I run, some workshops on how to have really challenging, hard conversations and deliver difficult feedback. People are forgetting how to disagree with respect, how to debate ideas without attacking people. We absolutely should be able to have robust conversations about issues. We should be able to disagree and really rumble with ideas. Like, that's actually hugely important in businesses to make good decisions, in our politics to make sure that we're looking at things from all angles. But we need to be able to do that without just attacking each other. Now, it's a tactic, right? It is a tactic that sometimes is effective, because if I just am brutal and attack you, maybe you'll just shut up, Nick, and then I get my own way, and it's that power play. But if we actually want to get good results in business or personal life, we need that curiosity. We need that curiosity. I don't have to agree with you, but I've got a great little phrase that has been a mantra for me over the last few years, and I know it's helped a lot of people, and it's called get curious, not furious.
I love that.
Get curious, not furious, get curious, not furious. So if someone says something that really pushes your button and you really want to disagree with, and, not necessarily on social media, because we know there's a lot of keyboard warriors there, but depending on your relationship with the person, oftentimes the best thing to do is take a deep breath and then ask a question. So I might say something like, Nick, I'm going to be honest, that is really different to how I see things. Can you help me understand how you came to that position? And what that does is, one, creates a bit of space so I can regulate myself. But then you can share context with me, because I might have just been about to bite your head off. But then you share, well, actually, Leah, in my upbringing, this happened, or this has been my experience in life. And we might still really disagree. But because you shared how you came to that position, I might go, well, I still disagree with you, but I can see how you got there. So then I might still come back and say, well, I appreciate that's your perspective, Nick. However, I really strongly disagree with that for these reasons, okay? But that curiosity is key. In terms of the victim mindset, I speak a lot about that in my work too, and, draw on that beautiful work of Viktor Frankl, who wrote the classic book Man's Search for Meaning, which, still stands up as one of the best books around managing your mindset, written in the 1940s. He was a Holocaust survivor, a psychiatrist, and he came out of Auschwitz after his whole family was killed. And the quote that always stays with me is, you can't change a lot of this isn't the quote, but you can't change a lot of what's going on around you, but you can always choose your response. The last of the human freedoms, and this is part of the quote, the last of the human freedoms is our power to choose our response in any given set of circumstances, to choose our own way. And when we can no longer change a situation, we're challenged to change ourselves. Between stimulus and response is a space. In our space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Now, victim mindset is easy. It's seductive, because if I'm in a victim mindset, I don't have to take personal responsibility for my choices or how I'm communicating and behaving. I can blame everything else, my situation, my circumstance, and I focus on all the problems And regardless of if it's really bad stuff happening or not, poor me, why does bad stuff happen to me? Life's not fair. And it can feel good in the moment, but gee, it's a recipe for a pretty bit miserable life.
Yeah.
You know, you'll get to the end of your life and probably go, well, that sucked. That wasn't fair. If only my circumstances were different. And I don't know about you, but that's not how I want to go out, right? A creator mindset where we draw on Frankl's work and say you get to choose your response. That means that regardless of what's going on around us, and it doesn't mean that stuff doesn't impact us. Of course it does. There's some really hard stuff going on in the world. But we look at that stuff and we go, all right, bad stuff happens to good people all the time. Life is not fair. In fact, sometimes it bloody sucks. And in the middle of that, I get to choose my response.
Yes.
I get to choose how I show up. Now, I teach that in a lot of my communication workshops. I use a couple of models, the dreaded drama triangle and the empowerment dynamic, where it talks about these positions. And I had a woman in a workshop in 2019. It was just a half-day workshop, so only, a quick little session. And I presented those models, which come from a guy called David Emerald, who is based in the States, has written a couple of incredible books. And I worked with this woman and she did the training, great, went off on her way. In 2022, I got an email from this lady. And the email's actually included in my second book there, Steer Through the Storm. And she emailed me and she said, Leah, I just want to let you know what's happened over the last few years and how I'm using those models of mindset in my life. Now, this sounds made up because it's such an extreme story, but it's very real. This woman is an Indigenous Australian. She runs a disability support agency in regional Victoria. And she said in early 2020, just before COVID hit, she went into hospital for relatively minor surgery on her leg. And the surgery went well, but when in the process of taking the stitches out, the wound got infected and she actually ended up with a golden staph infection. And you can imagine going through 2020 with what was going on in hospitals and COVID, how horrific that was. And it actually got to the point where the infection got so bad that they had to amputate her leg. Now, in 2020, 2022, I should say, when she emailed me, she was emailing me to say that unfortunately the infection had spread and they had to amputate her second leg. She is now a bilateral amputee. Now, she emailed me to say, I'm not going to pretend it's all been sweetness and light. I've been to very, very dark places. But she said, I want to let you know that one of the things I am holding on to is what you spoke about in that training, that I can't control what's happening to me, but I always get to choose my response, just like Frankl did in Auschwitz and during the Holocaust. And it still gives me goosebumps now because I think, I don't know if I could do that. Like, I practice this stuff pretty intensely, but this was next level. But, she said to me, she said they were taking my legs whether I liked it or not. It was the only thing they could do to keep me alive. But what happens next is up to me. Now, she is still the CEO of that Aboriginal Disability Support Service. She is still doing incredible work in the community. Life is really hard, but she has chosen her response off the back of that. And I just think, I know that's an extreme example. I know Frankl's example is extreme, but I think what it can help all of us do is remember it doesn't mean every day is a good day. It doesn't mean you have to just be toxically positive and, you're not allowed to have your moments and get sad and feel the whole range of human emotions. But if we keep coming back to, whether it's in our communication, in our mindset, in our relationships, I actually get to choose my response here. It really does change everything.
Yeah, I mean, that's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that story. And it is, it's crazy. It's shocking and such a powerful way to show how far this can be taken. And I think that's often, a response people will have where if you're trying to talk about, being accountable and taking taking action on yourself like that. People might say, "Oh, easier for you to say," but I've got things harder and blah blah blah. And maybe true. That how many levels can we go to of who's got it harder? It's kind of irrelevant, because all any individual can deal with is, in this current moment, the current situation I'm in, I've got a set of circumstances, and I can respond negatively and blame and complain and play the victim, or I can roll my sleeves up and put one foot forward and try and make the most of it. And that's normally going to lead to a much more positive outcome. So
and we end our life then going, it doesn't mean everything worked out for us, but I'd much prefer to be going out going, you know what, I had a crack. Some things worked, some things didn't, but I had a crack.
Exactly. You won't have any regrets, and you won't be bitter. And I think it's just, the point you're talking about, I find so frustrating in the world with the, how we judge each other so much. And, I love your example where you were saying, you might have two people that, even when they get to the bottom of understanding each other, they have different views, but then there's respect there. And I just can't stand the whole thing about, let's not listen to someone because we think their value system's so different. Let's try and understand. And why not look at it that, I know I've never, learnt a lot and had to change or grow my perception on things when I've just had conversations with people who had the exact same view as me. When I have had, a lot of my friends, different sides, they have different political views, they have different views on many things. And sometimes there might be a slightly, heated conversation. But sometimes I've actually had to change my views on things because I have drilled down and I've thought, wow, that's made me grow. And it is an intense reaction you have, like you're talking about, where it's challenging your ego. It's challenging, this worldview that you've built up. It's like this self-righteous thing of, but this is my identity. It can't be wrong. And it's kind of, it's hard to let go, but you grow. And it's just so frustrating because we can learn. We can learn through doing that. And I think
there's always that piece, we're not talking about the super extreme where, if someone's denying someone's right to exist or something like, the basics of human rights, we're not talking about that here. But if it's, even if I really disagree with what you're saying and we don't, even if the end point is we're going to agree to disagree, this is also really important. If you want to influence other people, right? If I want you to be persuaded by my argument, I've got to understand where you're coming from. So people who just, it's so ineffective because then we're just shouting at each other. No one's listening. We're just yelling into the wind, which is so ineffective. If I genuinely, even if I'm going, oh gosh, I cannot believe Nick thinks that. How did he get there? If I want to counter you, I need to try to understand so that I can then craft my challenging point. If I want to convince you otherwise, I've got to know how you see the world to be able to do that effectively. Because otherwise, if I don't understand you, you're not going to be listening to my counterpoint because it's not in your language, it's not your worldview. So it's hard though. I totally get that emotional regulation piece, particularly right now. Is hard, but that's where I love little phrases like get curious, not furious, or even assume positive intent. These little mantras that we can, and you can even say them out loud. You can say, all right, Nick, I heard this thing on a podcast and it was get curious, not furious. So I'm going to practice that now, and ask a question. But it's a pretty worrying time when we're losing our ability to even have the conversations we need to. And in a professional sense, in a business sense, if you are not open to considering the ideas of other people, there will be something in your blind spot. You will make a decision that backfires, that blows up, that could have been avoided if you had have been open to and considered other ideas. You don't have to agree with those ideas, but there might be something hugely valuable in them.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying this podcast, please click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram at NickBrax. I really appreciate your ongoing support. Yeah, and I think just reminding ourselves that instead of approaching everything out of fear and, closing ourselves off, approaching it that, and obviously there are the extreme examples and, where, use our logic. If someone
Yes.
is so extreme on either side, or a dangerous person, or actually an evil person or whatever,
Yep.
sure, we know how to react to that. But in general, regardless of someone's views, most people have good intentions. They're not out there to hurt people, and we seem to think that they are.
We have a negative bias as humans, and it's something to be really aware of. One of the things I love to do in workshops is say to people, okay, so put your hand up if you come to work to deliberately do a bad job or to deliberately ruin everyone else's day. Put your hand up, all of those people in a room. And of course, everyone laughs. And then I say, do some people come to work and do a bad job? I get nods like, yes, and they do. Some people come to work and they do a bad job. Yes. But is it their intention to come to work and deliberately do a bad job and deliberately ruin your day? Very, very rarely you get those people, but it is so unlikely. Most people are just like you. They're trying to earn a living just like you. They're trying to support their family and pay their mortgage or their rent just like you. They are coming to work to do their job just like you. Doesn't mean sometimes they don't snap or they're not regulated or they behave in poor ways, and they'd have to be held accountable for that. But if we come in with the mindset of assume positive intent, that will help us ask a question to clarify the meaning. So instead of going off on the spiral of, oh my gosh, Nick hates my guts because I just walked past him and he didn't acknowledge me, and that's because he really hates me, and we go on and create these whole stories in our mind instead of asking a question. Or just maybe, you get that short email, and instead of going, I can't believe they're so rude and they sent me that rude email, considering maybe they were really busy when they fired that email off, and I'm going to respond politely as if their email was polite. Now, if it becomes a continued pattern of behavior, that's something different entirely. But assume positive intent is a pretty big game changer for how we react to people, especially if they do have a different opinion to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, final question here, and then we go into sort of 5 closing questions.
Perfect.
How important is listening when it comes to all of this, to communication?
Huge. It's something a lot of us don't do very well. Listening to understand rather than listening to respond, again, to use Stephen Covey's language.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I like that.
It's huge. A lot of us don't. A lot of us listen to respond. It's almost like we're in that table tennis battle of, okay, now it's Nick's turn and he said his thing and I'm not even listening. I'm just formulating my response in my head and then I just shoot something back. And again, it's that just yelling at each other, or even just not yelling, but we're just going back and forward. No one's taking it in. So listening to respond, one of my mates, Oscar Trimboli, is one of Australia's top listening experts, and he talks about the deeper you breathe, the deeper you listen. So often it's about slowing it down and taking deep breaths as you're listening. And that's, again, where curious, not furious is awesome, because listening doesn't just mean you have to stay silent. It means you can ask questions to clarify, that you're actually trying to understand what's going on. Because remember, no one is a perfect communicator. It might be that you said something and I've taken it one way, but actually from your body language or the look on your face, I'm thinking, oh, I'm not sure that Nick meant that, or did he really mean that? So I might go, hey, Nick, to clarify, when you said this, my take was this. Is that right? Is that what you meant? So listening, seeking to understand is absolutely vital, and every human wants to feel seen and heard.
Yeah. So because we know that feeling when the other person's not listening, or when we're both not listening. Like if you're both engaged and really listening, that's real connection, and everyone knows that feeling. It's that you can tell, like you just get a buzz out of it when you can really connect with someone.
Yeah, spot on. But it's that two-way, right? It's the listening to really understand. And when we feel like we're not being heard, we either get louder or we shut down. So listening, listening is the foundation of empathy, right? Empathy is trying to understand someone else's perspective, even if you disagree. Yeah. And it requires listening. It's absolutely fundamental to communication.
And it's so easy for us to get, stuck in our own pattern of thinking and assume everyone should or does, think the same way and just apply that to everyone. So, yeah, I think it's such an important one. I think there's so many things I could talk to you about with this topic. I think we'll have to do a round two. But before I go into these final questions, where you've written a number of books, I think, from what you've told me. Where can our listeners go if they want to find more information about you? They want to look at your books, buy the books, anything else they want to learn more about, these different topics that we're talking about, or they want to work with you, where can we send them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got 2 books. The first one's called Soft is the New Hard, How to Communicate Effectively Under Pressure. It's not saying be soft, folks. It is a play on the hard skills, soft skills, to say the soft skills are the hardest part, this communication self-leadership piece. The second book is Steer Through the Storm, How to Communicate and Lead Courageously Through Change. Really important in the current environment. How do we bring people with us and deal with the feelings of the people around us? Both of those should be available on any online platform, but if you want to find me, you can check out my YouTube channel, which is Leah Mether Speaker. Heaps of videos on there. Or my website, which for US listeners does have a tricky AU on the end. So sorry about that, folks. But if you just plug my name, which is leahmether.com.au, into your search engine, the website will come up. And even though it's got that little Australian moniker on it, I do work globally as well.
Great. Well, yeah. So anyone listening, if you're not in Australia, put the AU on, but we will have it in the show notes as well. So just go to the links and click. I'll put all of them in there, YouTube, website, etc. So make sure to check out all of the links. So I'm going to jump into these last closing questions. First one is, what's your best childhood memory that comes to mind for you?
Traveling around Australia in the caravan with my 3 sisters and my parents. We did a 3-month road trip when I was 5, and then again when I was 10, and then when I turned 21 and finished uni, I actually took off for a year on my own with a tent in the back of my car and did a year around Australia on my own. So, wow. That gave me the travel bug. I've travelled the world since, but it was that foundational memory.
I love that. What do you think's currently the biggest burden on mental health in society?
Oh, God. There's so much to that. So much to that. But I do think the biggest burden at the moment, it really is this, the polarization and the dehumanization. I think it's a really dangerous place because it pushes people to extremes. There's a lot to that. Yeah. I do speak a lot about mental health in my work and do some work for Beyond Blue as well. But right now, I think the polarization piece is a real worry.
Yeah, that's a huge one. What would you say your definition of happiness is?
My definition of happiness, I think happiness is not just something that, we land on. It's not something just to strive for and then, ta-da, I'm in happy. I think if you are living true to you and, making choices and have the freedom to choose how you show up, that creates happiness in your life, regardless of actually what's going on around you.
I love that. That's I haven't heard it exactly put like that, but I think that's a great way to put it. Just if you just keep going back to showing up for yourself and making sure you're doing that, whether it's painful or not, there's going to be that peace of mind will come from it.
Yeah, you're okay in your own skin, and I think that is core for good mental health and happiness. That you are comfortable when you look in the mirror, that you are being true to the person you want to be.
Absolutely. If you could give one piece of advice to your 18-year-old self, what would that be?
That would be, done is better than perfect.
Yeah,
I am
a
type A personality. The things I did to myself and my mental health through secondary school, all self-inflicted because I was such a high performer. And of course, none of it was relevant to life, really. Like, yes, there were some things in there, but, done is better than perfect. I would never have written the books if I was still the perfectionist I was at 18. I call myself a recovering perfectionist now. It's still something I work on, but geez, if I'd learned it a bit earlier at 18, it would have saved me a lot of heartache.
Yeah, no, I'm similar, and I love the progress over perfection. Just make a step forward. Don't worry too much about how it's going to unfold. Just put one foot in front of the other, because otherwise we can just obsess. And I think it's something a lot of us struggle with. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So final one, what are you most proud of?
I am most proud that I really genuinely can say that I am living true to my values and the person I want to be. That I have made some courageous decisions, particularly over the last few years with the marriage separation. But through it all, I'm modelling to my kids and can look in the mirror. I make mistakes. I'm certainly not perfect, but I'm most proud of the fact that I'm comfortable with who I am and how I'm living my life. And, hopefully I've got a lot of years ahead of me, but, God forbid if something did happen, I know that, there's lots of things I still want to do, but I wouldn't be regretting the person that I am.
Yeah, you're living a life that's authentic to you, and you're not putting things off. And I think it's an amazing example. And I think the work you're doing is, like you're saying, more important than ever. And I think, everyone needs to hear this stuff. And I've taken so much out of it. I know our listeners will. So thank you for sharing it. And keep doing the work you're doing. Thank you for giving us your time.
Right back at you. And thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Leah Mether, for joining me today and offering your insights. And thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode and any suggestions for topics you'd like to hear about. Feel free to just leave a comment or send me a DM. Your feedback's always appreciated. Please don't forget to click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram. It really makes a difference. Thank you so much.